Welcome back to the channel. If this is the first time on my YouTube channel, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel because I do content like this all the time. And then if you like what you're seeing right now, feel free to give this video a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. Now, without further ado, let's talk about the topic at hand. And this time, I want to talk about video game prices in the gaming industry because I'm not too happy with the prices in the video game industry. More specifically, I'm talking about next generation prices when it comes to next generation games. So you guys know for the longest time now, in recent memory, games usually cost $60 no matter what platform you're on, except for there's some rare cases where a developer will be like, yeah, we'll throw you a bone. We don't think our game's worth $60, or maybe sometimes you'll see some collections of video games where they're not $60 because they're older games that are remastered, and they're like, yeah, we just can't charge $60 for these games. But in today's world of video games, especially regards to next generation gaming, whether you're on the PS5 or the Xbox Series S or X, it really does seem like a lot of developers are trying to take advantage of people who are on the PS5 and the Xbox Series consoles just due to the fact that they're charging a little bit more money for their games. A lot of games I'm actually seeing next generation are actually $70. I would have really thought this wasn't a big deal, and I was just going to brush this off and say, yeah, that's starting to become the normal price in the gaming industry, at least when it comes to next generation, and a lot of developers are starting to do that, but that's not necessarily the case. If you look at a game called Elden Ring, I'm not too sure what the price is on PS5, but if you look at the price of Elden Ring on the Xbox Series S and X, that version specifically will only cost you $60. They're not trying to charge you any extra money for Elden Ring. And that game is a game, honestly, if it was going for $70 due to the hike in price, due to the fact that next generation games are a little bit more expensive, I would honestly say, yeah, that is expensive, honestly, for a game out there, because $70 is $70, and that is quite expensive for a game. You're getting close to $100. But the deal is, with a game as great as Elden Ring and as amazing as Elden Ring is, I don't really want to say this, but I do want to say this at the same time. Honestly, I would end up paying for Elden Ring, honestly, for $70, because if any game's worth that price, that game is worth the price of admission, even if it was a little bit more higher. But some of these games are taking it a little bit too far, and some of these games, like for instance, the brand new Grand Theft Auto 5 patch that came out for the PS5 and the Xbox Series S and X, they're actually charging you for that, which doesn't make sense considering Grand Theft Auto 5 is a very old game. You look at Grand Theft Auto 5, Grand Theft Auto 5 came out in 2013 on the PS3 and the Xbox 360, and then they ported it to the PS4 and the Xbox One generation of consoles, and now it's on the Xbox Series S and X and on the PS5. But the thing is, though, you do have to pay for it, and it just doesn't make sense considering if you look at the patch for the next generation version of Grand Theft Auto 5, a lot of people already compared it, and what it pretty much boils down to, the fact that that game doesn't look different compared to the last generation versions of the game. What are you actually paying for? Because you do have to remember, graphics are getting better and better and better, and last generation games already look good. And if you probably play Grand Theft Auto 5 on something like the PS4 or the Xbox One, then of course it's not going to be really a great improvement, and it does kind of feel scummy. I don't really want to use that word because honestly, Grand Theft Auto is an amazing game, and I can see why it sold so many units, and it's definitely one of the biggest games in the gaming industry, at least when it comes to popularity, and at least when it comes to sales figures. It always seems like people are still buying that each and every day, and that does make sense. Everything inside the game being an amazing game, it just doesn't really seem like that game should actually have a next generation version, and they should be charging you for the next generation version of the game. It honestly seems like with the Grand Theft Auto situation, it really does seem like that game should be a game that they just patch outright and just give it more performance and give it more resolution to match the next generation consoles. And it does seem like that type of game. And it does seem like some companies out there, whether it's Rockstar or whether it's, like, for instance, WWE 2K22, I think that just recently released, pretty recently, that game is also being price hiked for next generation as well. You can't actually buy it for $60. I think I'm looking at it right now. It is going for $70 on next generation hardware. So you can see it is quite expensive for what it is. And some games just don't seem like it makes sense why they would want to raise the price of these games, considering a lot of these games could just be a patch, or they could just actually charge the same amount of money. I'm sure it really can't be a developers cost to actually make these games, because if you take in consideration something like Elden Ring, why isn't Elden Ring's next generation version going for $70? That company's not trying to raise the price of their game, and that's only $60, whether you buy it on last gen or whether you buy it on current gen gaming, which is next generation hardware. It's just not a game that they're charging much more no matter what version you buy. And I'm just really fed up with this because it doesn't seem like you're gaining much more value. It really doesn't make sense. Not every company's doing this. I would honestly brush this whole thing off if every game company just started selling their games at $70. But like I said again, not every developer is selling their games for $70. Some developers are deciding to price their games at the normal $60 price tag. If you look at games on the Nintendo Switch, they're still going for $60, and it just doesn't make sense. It really does seem like they're really trying to get you to pay a little bit more just because, oh, you have a brand new console, so it looks like you're probably going to want to pay up for that next generation version of the game that'll have all the bells and whistles like higher resolutions and higher frame rates to match the actual console. But that just doesn't make sense, and some of these games don't really justify the price increase or even justify anything like that. Like for instance, again, the Grand Theft Auto 5 situation, it just really doesn't seem fair to the consumer. And I'm honestly really fed up with this because it doesn't seem like it does make sense. Maybe for some games, but for a lot of games, it just doesn't make sense. What are you actually charging extra for? And for some of these games, you know, no matter what, a lot of these games, or some of these games anyway, that are being price hiked for next generation hardware or current gen hardware now that we speak, you know, a lot of these games out there are actually indeed also getting microtransactions and DLC and things like that. And you do have to remember as well, not every person has that money to buy a brand new game. Some people only buy brand new games every once in a while, and $70 is $70, and $70 could be a make it or break it deal for some people out there who are trying to buy a game. Sure, $70 is not much more expensive than $60, but every little penny adds up, and maybe you can only buy like 1 or 2 games a year, and maybe you have a whole bunch of different platforms and things like that, and that $70 adds up, especially when you want to buy a couple of games a year. It just doesn't make sense. I don't really understand this mentality, and it's not like developers can say, oh, the next generation of hardware is brand new. It's brand new to some extent, but the thing is here, we're talking about next generation hardware. Next generation hardware has already been out on the market now for a couple of years now, so it's kind of getting old news. What I really want to know is, are games on the PS5 and the Xbox Series X/S going to start being $70 for the most part, just because they think, oh yeah, these games cost more to develop or are getting better frame rates and resolutions that weren't there on last generation hardware, so let's really price hike all this. Honestly, it just doesn't make sense to me, and I'm not really too happy about this. It just seems like these companies are very greedy for money, especially when you know, again, a lot of these companies are going to put things like microtransactions in the game. They're also going to do things like put DLC in the game, and it's just going to cost a lot of money for gaming, and honestly, it just doesn't make sense. I think games could still be $60. I know the argument there is development cost a lot of money, but again, $60 could still make you a lot of money. If you make a really good game that everyone's going to love, everyone's going to enjoy, you put your heart and soul into the game, and you make these games that are worth $60, I think you don't need to increase the price. But honestly, as bad as this sounds, I can't really blame any developer out there for charging more for their game, just due to the fact that, you know, a lot of people are going to be desperate for that game, and they have to play it around launch, and they're going to be like, yeah, I'll pay $10 more, and that $10 more will give that company much more money in the long term. Yes, $10 price hike doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you consider how many units some of these companies are selling when it comes to their video games, that's absolutely going to mean a lot of units sold, and I understand that, but then I don't understand that. I think keeping them at 60 is still a fair deal, and I think it wouldn't turn too many people off, and I think it would just be the right way to go about this and things like that. But again, that's just me. What do you really think about this situation? Comment down in the description below. Do you not mind games being $70 this current generation? Do you hate it? Do you wish games were $60? What's your whole thoughts on this whole opinion on games going from $60 to $70? And in some rare cases, I've seen games that are brand new even go for $80, believe it or not, which is just absolutely insane for brand new games. But I guess they're just assuming that maybe you're looking forward to that one brand new game release a year, and you're willing to pay that high high price in the actual video game. Honestly, it wouldn't be too bad of a deal if they wouldn't do things like, oh, I'm going to raise the price of the game, but instead of just raising the price of the game, I'm going to add things like unnecessary microtransactions that really make you feel like you have to buy all these microtransactions and really nickel and dime you as a consumer. And that's something I'm just not a fan of. Maybe if they were price hiked and they didn't give you things like unnecessary microtransactions and things like that, I wouldn't be too bothered by this, but there's just too many things wrong about current gen gaming that I'm not too happy about, especially when it comes to the prices of the actual video games. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.